Okay, so while we are recording, let me let me share my screen. Please confirm if you can see me.
I can see you, sir.
All right, all right. Okay, so from our curriculum, we are down to week 3, and we say we'll be talking about the introduction to CSS, CSS properties, more on CSS, advanced CSS, and Flexbox. So for today and tomorrow, these are the areas we are going to be covering. And from our textbook, um, I think this section starts from page, let me see, okay, page 226, Introduction to CSS. And we are going to be seeing a few and important things. We're going to see how it works. We are going to see how CSS works and how to use it and the kind of selectors we use. Okay. All right. So back to our VS Code. So this is our VS Code. This is our folder we'll be using to learn HTML for a while. Okay, so I'm going to use it to introduce us to CSS as well. So for you to write CSS codes, there are actually different ways we write CSS codes. But I would give you an idea of the three of them, but we'll be focused mainly on one. Okay, so what is CSS again? Remember I said CSS means cascading style sheets, right? If you go to your textbook, you would see the same thing about CSS. You can read up all of this. It's the same thing as we'll be discussing here. So, cascading style sheet basically in the sense that it's just adjusting properties of your HTML elements, all right, one after the other. So it's stacking them. Every property you change, you're stacking one against another. All right, that's why it's cascading, like it's stacking. Okay. But the idea is that you would be able to style this from our running site. This is our index.html. This is what it looks like. So for you to change the color of this text from black to probably white or red, it means you have to change the color property, right? So you can tell CSS that you want the color property of this particular text. So instead of black, you want it to be yellow. And immediately CSS will change its color to what it needs to be. Okay, so that's what we're about to learn now. So, but for us to write CSS code, we have to create a CSS file. And creating a CSS file is similar to creating a HTML file. The only difference is their extension. So just as .html tells you that this is a HTML file you're creating, you need .css to let you know that, okay, this is a CSS file you want to write. And it helps your editor better understand your codes. So to create a CSS file, we normally follow a convention that says we should call it style. So we call it style, then the extension is .css. You can name it whatever you want, all right? You can name it whatever you want, but I will start with style because most developers use their general CSS to be styles. So All I want is I want it to be on the same layer here. I don't want to create a folder for it. So I'll just come here, right click, and go to new file. So immediately I write the name of the file. I say style.css. So like I said, this part, which is the name of your file, can be anything you want it to be. Okay, but the .css stands no matter what. Let me zoom in a little bit. Sorry, you can mute the mic. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have created a CSS file, but just creating it is not enough because right now our HTML has no relationship with this CSS. So in other words, we need to be able to link our HTML file and our CSS file together. So when you create a CSS file like this and you have to import it in your HTML file, it is called external CSS because you're creating an external file for your CSS and then you're importing it into your HTML file so you can effect changes on that HTML file. Okay, so how do we link our CSS to our HTML? We link using a tag called link. So that link should be inside your head element, right? So between the opening and closing tag. So it can be anywhere you want. So I'll just come down here and I'll create this. So I will use the link tag. The link tag CSS. So it creates it for me. As you can see, it's a self-closing tag. Okay, so this is the link tag and it takes in two attributes, rel and href. Okay, so this rel is constant. The value should be style sheets anytime you're using CSS. Anytime you're trying to import a CSS file, the value of rel should be style sheets because that's what you want. All right. But what should be dynamic is this href. So this href, the value of href is the path to your CSS file. Okay, so right now, when I created the link, VS Code helped me out by writing this in full. Okay, so right now this is not correct because this is assuming that style.css is inside the same folder as my index.html, which is false. If you miss any step, please do not fail to unmute your mic and call my attention back to it so I can go over it again. So I'm saying that right now the path to this style.css here is not correct because our index.html file, which we are trying to import the CSS in right now, is inside a folder, which is this parent folder. Okay, so it is the parent folder that is on the same level with style.css. So which means for us to import style.css inside our index.html, we have to come outside of this folder first, then we can see style.css. So using this is assuming that style.css is inside this parent folder also, and so you just go to it directly, which is wrong. So what should be done is, remember I told you use // to come outside of your folder. So when you do, you can see all the different files outside that folder, and then you can choose the one you want, which is style.css. Okay, so do not forget to call my attention, like I said. So right now, our file is now linked, and now we can continue to edit whatever property we want. Okay, so let's start with our first property. Okay, so for us to be able to change the property of any element, so if you don't know what an element is, so every tag here is referred to as an element. Okay, so instead of saying you want a h1 tag, you can say you want a h1 element, which means you want the opening tag, the closing tag, and its contents. So everything like this is referred to as an HTML1 element. Okay, likewise, this is a paragraph element. This is also a paragraph element. So you hear developers using elements and tag interchangeably. Okay, there isn't much difference so long as the person understands the context you're using it in. Okay, so let's say I want to change the color of this H1. Okay, there are different ways in which I can select this, because I can't just come here and say I want color to be equal to yellow. This is a wrong way of writing CSS anyways. So I'm just trying to explain something to us. So even if this was correct, you find out that nothing will work, because you're not actually pointing to any particular element that I want to change its color. Okay, so it means you have to first pick an element you want, and then you change a particular property of that element you want. So what am I saying is that this element is a H1 element. So let's say I want H1 element to have a color of yellow. So what I can do is write the element first. So this selector we are learning is tag selector. So let me write it, tag selector CSS. Okay. I did something here by putting this sign and this sign at the end, and so this became gray color. So what I'm doing here is called comments, right? So in coding, developers usually leave comments um, for other developers to see and probably understand their codes properly. So the browser doesn't see a comment, right? You'll not be able to see this. It doesn't have any implication in your browser. It is meant for other developers to actually understand your code properly. So what I'm doing here is saying the selector I'm using here is a tag selector. So if somebody opens up my code and sees these comments, they understand that, okay, the lines of code under it would be ways to select a tag in CSS. Okay, that's what is the comments are basically used for. So now let's see how we select using a tag. So I want to select this tag, which is a H1. So I can use the name of the tag itself by saying H1. So with this, I have selected a particular element I want to change its style. So now, after choosing an element that you want to change a particular property, you use curly brackets. So you write all the properties of this H1 that you want to change inside these curly brackets. Okay, so the first one we want to change is the color. So you can write your color, and now instead of writing equal to, what we use is column. So in this column, you can now write your yellow and close with a semicolon, and then you save. Make sure you save your work. So once we save our work and we go to our browser, and now let's refresh this. So immediately I refresh, you see that the heading is now having a color of yellow. Okay, because I'll be able to change that particular property of the heading. So if you want to now change, make sure you want, maybe you say the font of this heading is small. It means you have to change another property that affects its size. All right. And so what property of this element will change the size? So for changing the size of the text in CSS, we use a property called font size. So you cannot cram all of these properties, right? Because these properties are hundreds of thousands. There are so many properties, right? So you can't cram them at a go. So how do you get to master all of this? It's as you keep creating projects, as you keep writing projects, writing codes, you get used to some types of selectors, some types of properties. All right. Why the rest that you don't remember? Whenever you want to change a particular property, all you do is you go to Google and ask for the CSS property that does this, and immediately you get communities that are giving you answers. and from there you start getting used to some of these properties. So you are not supposed to cram them by default. You're supposed to understand that, okay, for every change you want to make, there is a property that affects this change. So right now I want to change the size of the text. Okay, so we use the property that I said is called a font size. So because we're using VS Code, you can see all of these properties that's already suggesting to you. So you probably don't need Google anymore. All you can do is write the first one and you see a couple of properties there to choose from. But because we know we want to change the size, we quickly go to the size. All right. So now for CSS, there are particular units of measurement in CSS. The first is pixel, which is the most common we'll be using. Then we have ROM and EM, which are relative. We won't use that so often. And then the last one is percentage. But for font size, it is advised for you to use pixel. Okay. So now, let's say I want this to be 2 pixel. So this will be a very, very small size. Okay. So if I go to my browser and I refresh, you see it has reduced. You can't see it. But if I try to zoom in, let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, I can't zoom in. I can see it myself, but you can't see it. It is right here at this top. Okay, because the fonts are small. So now instead of 2 pixel, let me increase it to, let's say, 50 pixel, which I claim would be very big, unlike before. So refreshing, you see it is now big. So if this is not big enough, I can further increase it to, let's say, 100 pixels. And now if I refresh, you see it getting bigger. All right, so this is how we change font sizes. There are so many. You can change the thickness of your fonts. You can change the type of fonts. Okay, so let's change the font type. I don't like this type of font. I want to change it to a different font size. So we use a particular property for that, which is font family. Okay, so like I said, you will not be able to cram all of these properties immediately, but with time you start getting used to them because you're using them so frequently. Okay, so let me change the font family. So font family, now it's VS Code are suggesting most of the font types that are on your local storage, your computer, right? So these are the ones that are there. So let me say I go for this particular font size, font type rather, font family, and I save. So these are like options. If your computer doesn't have this, it goes over to this. If this doesn't work, it goes over to this, and it just keeps going until the default, which is sans serif. So what is this is trying to say is that if it looks for this entire font on your system and doesn't find it, it will show sans serif, which is common in every system. Almost every system has sans serif, so that would be the default font to do. Okay, so if I go back and I refresh, you see immediately that the font type, the font family has changed to a different font, which I feel is more appealing to my ears, and I'm okay. So I can now go over to styling something different. So this is how we effect changes in HTML and CSS. And from our projects that we'll be working on, we'll be using most of these properties to effect some changes, to effect sizes, font colors, and the rest of them. Font sizes, as you can see, these font sizes are different. Okay, so we would be going into all of these one after the other. Okay, but first let's finish with the different selectors we have. So right now I've been able to select using a tag. Okay, so which means if I create another H1, let me just copy this down. and I change this to, this is the second, and I save this. So let me refresh. So you now see the two of them now have the same color. The reason is that in my CSS, I chose the H1 tag specifically. So which means every H1 in my index.html should have a color of yellow, should have a font size of 100 pixel, and this particular font family. Okay, so but there might be situations where you have more than one H1 file, but you don't want them to have the same properties, right? So we now have to introduce two other selectors. The first selector I'll be talking about is an ID. Okay, we spoke about ID when we were doing forms, and we said you can, if your ID value is the same for an input, is the same as your for value for your label, it means your input and your label are connected. Okay, but for this case, the ID would be like a specific identifier for a particular element. So what am I trying to say? If I want this to be unique, I can give it an ID. And let's say the ID is second heading. So this is the ID value I've chosen for this particular H1. Okay, so the convention with ID is that once a particular element has a particular ID, for this example, heading name, no other element should share that same ID name, ID value. Okay, that's hence the ID term, identifier, specific identifier. All right. So ID should be for one element alone. So which means if I want this one to have an ID also, I shouldn't give it the same ID. It should be different. So I can say this should be first. Sorry, it should be first heading. Okay, so this is the convention of IDs. So now, how do I select an ID value in my CSS and then change its property? So for me to choose this ID, remember when I was trying to take this H1 value, all I wrote was the name of the tag. So if I come down here and I choose, let's say I want to style second heading, let me just copy this, and I come down here and I also write second heading and I do this. This means second heading is a tag, a particular CSS and HTML tag that I want to style, which is wrong. Second heading is not a HTML tag, right? It is an ID. So I need to let my editor understand that this particular selector is an ID selector. Let me comment over here. Let me say ID selector CSS. Okay, so how do we show that this is an ID and not a tag? We do that by using hash. So when you put hash, then the name of your ID, it quickly denotes that the second heading is an ID of a particular element, as you can see here. Okay, so now this is no longer a tag selector, it is now an ID selector. So now, let's say I still want to change the color. I can now change this color to red. And I save. So now let's see, because this is saying H1 should have a color of yellow. And now over here, I'm saying that any element with an ID or second heading should have a color of red. So let's see what happens. So now if I refresh, you see that even though this is still a H1 tag, right? It is not sharing the same color as this H1. It is now having a different color. Hence the term cascading. So in CSS, there are some things that have more preference. or more repetition, right? So when you give an ID a value, it supersedes every other thing. It supersedes elements you've changed a property with their tag name. Okay. ID is very powerful. That's why it is a specific ID for a particular element. Okay. So if you want to change the size also, you can further go on to do that. So this is how ID are selected in CSS. Next up is, what if I want this H2 and this paragraph, right, to share the same property, share probably the same color of text, right? And I've told you that IDs should be for one particular element. You shouldn't share IDs. So the writers of CSS came up with another idea to bring up a new selector called class selectors. So here, this attribute is ID, but we can have a new attribute called class, right? And let's say we want to give this a green color. So this is the name of the class, all right? So the difference between class and ID is that you can share a particular class name with as many elements as you want. So I'm going to just allow this H2 and this paragraph share the same class name, which is green color. So it means whatever style I give to green color will affect this paragraph and will also affect this H2 element. So let's see. I come to my style of CSS. Let me indicate that this is class selector CSS. So what is the class name? So remember, for tag we use the element, the tag name itself. For ID we use hash. So it means class should have its own. For class you write dots, then the name of the class. The name of the class is green color. So I'm assuming you know what this class should do. You should be able to change the color of the text to green. So it means, let me change this color to green. And now let's go back to our application to see what is going on. So once I refresh, you see now that this paragraph over here is sharing the same color as this heading. Okay, so these are the basic ways you can select properties, elements, and change a particular property of that element. Is there any question so far on this before I move on? Is there anything that is not really clear to you that you need more clarity on? None? Okay. So I'll assume the silence means you're following.
Sorry.
Yeah, you have a
I want to
question?
ask a question.
Okay.
Yeah, the selector, is it once
Yeah.
we type the for instance ID selector, the comments will just come out automatically?
No. Okay. So these comments you will be written manually by you. And like I said, for you to write a comment, you use backslash star. Then to close it, you
Okay.
use star backslash. So it is in between here. You now write this. What I am doing instead is I'm using a shortcut by avoiding writing this first one. So I just write whatever I want to write. Then I use a shortcut to comment it out. That's what I'm doing. But this, what I did here is the real way you create comments. So after that, you cannot write. So anything you write in between this open and close comment tags becomes a comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it. Yeah. Likewise, HTML. HTML has its own syntax for writing comments. The syntax it uses is um, less than sign dash dash, then between space, you put another dash dash and greater than sign. Over here, I think he uses exclamation, exactly. So over here, you cannot write your comment. So this is how comments are written in HTML. It is quite different from the way comments are written in CSS.
What's the function of the comment in HTML?
Okay, comments in any programming language or any markup language are the same thing. They don't have a particular function. It is just for other users of your code, other programmers to better understand your code. Otherwise, no browser or engine understands a comment. They don't see it. No computer sees a comment. It's just for your eyes alone to better understand your code. That's it for every programming language.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, so this is just what we've spoken about. You have your selector, and down here you have your declaration, which is the particular property you want to change and the value you want it to have. Okay, so if you go down to in this textbook, there are different selectors aside the ones we just spoke about. We spoke about let me see, we've spoken about ID selectors, we've spoken about class selector. Okay, so there are more we will be talking about. This type selector is almost like a tag, but it has additional things in it. We'll talk about it very soon. Let me see. There's okay. So we'll be seeing some of these selectors as we're going, because right now we don't have enough HTML codes to show you some of these examples. But so far, this is what we get from it, and the rules just tells you how to how to arrange your property and your elements, by the way, your elements, and inside your elements, how you create different properties and likes. Yes, you can ask a question. um, um Adeshion, I can see your hands up. You can ask a question. Can you
Oh,
hear
that
me?
was a mistake. Sir. That was a mistake.
Oh, okay, okay. All right. Okay, so for you to better see how CSS works, we are now going to start building our project. And in that project, we'll be seeing a lot of properties that will be changing, and some should I say procedures on how we build sites. And I shared a link for you to get a folder. So this folder, when you open it up, the news homepage/main. So when you open it up, you have two folders inside: assets and design. If you go inside design, you would see these designs inside. Their pictures, right? So when you open them up, the first one says active states. So this is just showing you, as you can see, there are sometimes emit pointers around. So these are just like showing you that when you hover in a website, you can hover on something. Hover is when you move your mouse on something, right? That's hover, right? So you're adding an hover effect. So this is the original color of these navigations. But when you move your mouse on any of them, they should have this red color instead of the normal one. All right. So this is a hover effect. So that's what active state is telling you. That whenever you hover on something, this is the color, or this is what happens. As you can see, when you hover on this, it changes this color to blue. It is originally it is red, but when you hover on it, it becomes blue. Likewise, this one, it is white by default, but when you hover on it, it changes this color. Also, this ones, okay? So that's what active state talks about. Then the desktop design is just telling you what this site looks like on your desktop design, which is your laptop, your and any other screen bigger than your laptop, right? So moving on, then you have your mobile design, which is this is how the site should look like on mobile screens. Okay. And then the last screen is telling you that when you click on this button on the top right here, you should open up like this down here like this. Okay, so this is what that folder tells you. So we are going to start off by writing by building some parts of this. Okay, so that's what it is. But it is inside this folder um you're supposed to create your code. So which means you'd have to open up a new folder, a new editor, a new window in your VS Code. It should be empty. Then you can drag and drop. If you don't want to drag and drop, you can go to file and open folder, then look for the path to this. But for me, I'm just going to drag this folder here and open it up. So this folder has opened up. So inside you see an index.html file already created for you. Okay, so it means I don't have to create a new HTML file. I should use this HTML file to create it. So these texts here are the contents of the site. If you look properly, you see that the contents here are the same thing that are here. Okay, so what is remaining are the images we have to add to the screen. So if we go back and we go to assets, if you open up assets, you see fonts, you see images. So all of these images are what you need to get this site. All right. Would follow along with each of them. So what are fonts? The fonts here is the fonts that they use, but this would be a later advanced topic on how to use these fonts. For now, we would not touch the fonts for now. So that's it for assets. Then if you go to style.guide, it's trying to tell you the screen size for desktop. So most desktop like mine is using 1440 pixel. That's the size of the screen. That's the width, right? Then for mobiles, it should be 375 pixel, right, for the width. Then coming down, you see these colors. So it's suggesting the colors for you to use. So it's almost like helping you out with most of the things to do. Okay, so all you have to do now is to start writing your code in your index.html file, which we will start now. But before that, let me open this up in our browser. I'll open up a new window and let me paste. So this is what we have for now. As you can see, this is just random text here. So we want this to look exactly like this. So we are going to start off by first creating the navigations. Okay, so in development, it is basically step by step. You have to build one step before you go on to the next. Okay, so we have to build these navigation parts before we move down to this main side. Okay, so let's start building. Sorry, this is what I'll need to open. Let me zoom in. Okay, so firstly, we want to make sure everything you're trying to do should be inside your body. So let me just take out this content so it doesn't confuse us. I'll take it out, Control X, and let me just paste them here. For now, they don't mean anything. So I'll just take instead of going to copy from the image, just copy them from here. But for now, we are more focused about these parts, this opening and close tag. So this part here is this project was taken from Front End Mentor. So it's like a software that gives you projects the level you want, either easy, medium, or hard. All right. So they give you this project and you're meant to submit it using GitHub. So when you submit, they kind of mark it for you and like give you a review of your solution and the rest of them. And that's why they put this here to let you know, so that people know that this is a project that was built by Front End Mentor. It is not your own it is not your own project. All right, so it's like a copyright information. Okay, so to start, let's create our navigations first. And for HTML5 or for semantic purpose, we use a particular tag to let the browser better understand your website, like I said before. So it has to understand your website properly. And the tag we use for that is a header tag, right? So this tag is what we use for creating a navigation, a header, more like, all right? So it's just semantic, all right, for your browser to understand that what you want to write here is you want to create a header. It doesn't really add any physical property to your site. It doesn't add any color or arrangement. So it's just a container. But this container is semantic because it has real SEO meaning to your site. Okay, so with this, if I save this, you see that nothing changes on our site. Let me just go back and refresh. Nothing changes on our site. We don't have anything. It's still the copyright by Front End Mentor and our contents, right? So let me create a CSS for this. So this is this is the style inside it for now. Okay, this is what we term as internal CSS, because you're writing CSS inside your HTML file. Okay, but why this is not advisable is because as you build a project, you build like very large scale projects, you can't keep writing CSS inside HTML, because at some point the CSS starts to cover more space in your code, so you can't see your HTML properly. So it's always advisable that you have a separate CSS file to write your CSS codes. So just like creating a new CSS file is termed external CSS, having your style written inside your style tag is termed internal CSS. Okay, so but we don't want to do this, so I'm going to create a new file and I'll call it style.css. Style.css. Okay, and now I am going to import style.css here. Let me take out, okay, I don't want to take this out, so I'll just leave it. Let me just create my file, link, and I'll choose CSS. So because my style.css was created on the same folder, I would not change the parts. I would leave it the way it is. So just to make sure it is linked, let me check with using this property. Don't worry about this. It's just to check. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to change the entire background color to black, and then I change the color of the text to white. Sorry, 1 minute. All right, sorry for that. So as you can see now, the background changes to black and the text changes to white, which means our CSS is actually working. So I'm just going to go back and take off this. So body is the tag, right? This particular tag here. So it's trying to tell you that your entire screen is the body, okay? So I would go back to take the style of while we start. So I want us to see our header. So I'm going to style our header by giving it a height of 20 pixel, and I'm going to give it a width of 100%. And then I'm going to change the background color to black as well. Okay, so this means I'm specifying a particular height for this container. All right, and then for the width, I want it to contain 100% of the screen. Okay, remember I told you there are different measurements for in CSS, pixel of which is 1, and then percentage, right? So now if I go back to my screen and let me refresh, you see a black part that covers from the top from left to right, right? Although there's a small spacing here, I'm going to show us how to take that off. But this is it. So this header is now of height 20 pixel. Okay, but from our design, okay, it doesn't really have a particular height. We shouldn't define the height for it itself. It should just be dynamic. It should have its own height. So how do we do that? We do that by taking away the height. We don't need this. So now let's create the content itself inside our header. So to create the content, you would have to take note that there is this this could be an image, it could be a text, but it's right here at the left hand side, and over here you have your navigations over here. Okay, so we need to take this into consideration because we have to structure our HTML to actually fit what it looks like. All right, otherwise our CSS wouldn't work. So what I'm saying is why the header, sorry, let me take this off. So why the header is like a container that comes like this. So the container is like this. So this is the container, the header container, right? So inside this header container also, there is another container for this one. And there's another container for this one. So you can put a space between these two containers. All right. So please follow up with this explanation because it's like the building code to building your sites properly. If you don't get your structure properly, you might be losing everything. Like you won't be your CSS won't work the way you want it to work. So what I'm saying is the header element or header tag is what created this first container for us. So it depends on what we create this element with. It could be a paragraph. I don't know if there's an image. Let's check if there's an image for it. By going to assets and images. Okay, we have a logo.svg, which is we have a logo, we have an image for it, right? So it means this container is an image. Okay, and then we now have the navigations over on this side. So this could be a nav, and this is an image, right? So if we now have two containers, the image and the nav, we can now look for a way to put a space between the two of them. Okay, why the remaining ones, these things inside stay together. Okay, and now also inside this nav container, you now have that each of these would have its own container. Each of them would have its own container because there's a space between them. You can't use just one paragraph to write all of this and then give them spaces. Okay, so this is like the building block of our structure. If you miss this, then you have serious CSS issue. So let's go back to creating this in our HTML. So like I said, header is the first container. So inside this container, we need two containers again. So I would use the image for the logo. And then after the image, I need the navigation. So for navigations, there is a semantic code, a semantic tag for navigations, which is NAV. So this shows that you want to create navigations. So inside, you can now have your UL for each of, to create each of the items, and LI should be each of the items. Okay. So I'll just copy and paste. So which is home as the first item. I'll cut this and paste it here. Then I'll go to new, Control X. I'm just cutting and pasting. I'll take this also, paste to X. Sorry for okay, just one more copy and paste, and we are done. Control X. Okay, so with this now, we now have this navigation container and this image container inside our header. But for this image, we need to put the path to a particular image, and we want this logo .svg to be that image, right? So the path to this logo is that from our index.html, which is here, we have to go first inside our assets folder, and inside our assets folder, we can now go into our images folder, and in there we can now get the logo. So what I'm saying is, right now we are in index. So to go to assets, all we do is say dot. All you do is say dot slash, and then you go into assets, and inside assets you go into images, and you go into logo.svg. So this is the correct path to getting this particular image that we want. And then here in the alt, you can give it anything, a text that better explains it. So I'm going to say logo of project, and then we save this. So once we save this and we refresh, so it increases the space, right? So let me take away the background color so we can see what is actually there. So let me just comment this out so the browser doesn't see this anymore. So refreshing, we now see, sorry, we now see our logo. We now see our logo showing up here, the left hand side. And let's go to our developers so we can better inspect what this is about. So first, I said we need a container, a header container that has these two particular things inside. It has the image, and then the navigation, right? So these are the two containers we are focused on. Okay, so that's the first way to go. So right now, this is what it looks like. Okay, but we are not there yet because we need it to look exactly like this. Okay, so that's where CSS needs to come in. And for that CSS to come in from our curriculum, we are supposed to talk about this flexbox. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So but before we talk about that, let's discuss why is this formed this way? Why do we have the image here first and then our navigation down here? Why is this not placed over here? So if we hover on our image, you see that it only highlights the image, which means this is an inline element. Remember from our week 2 discuss about inline elements and block elements, where we said inline elements they kind of take the entire width of the screen, but for um for block element for sorry inline elements only contain the content space, but for block elements it goes past its content space and expands across the entire width of the screen. So image is an inline element, and that's why you see it highlighting just the image. But this navigation highlights the entire screen to show that it is a block element. And because it is a block element, it cannot be on the same line with our image. That's why it is formed there. So for it to be over here with this image, to be like horizontally aligned with our image, we need to look for a way to make sure that it becomes an inline element, right? So that's just the analogy there. That's just the theory there. Okay, so all that remains now is to figure out a way to do this. So now let's figure out a way to do this. So Flexbox is you won't see Flexbox in this textbook, okay, because it is um a new technology that came up to make things easier. Most of the things here are a little bit hard. They use floats and the rest of them over here. But we're using Flexbox because it's more modern and used often here in our project. So let me explain with this container. So what we are trying to do here is in this header container where we have two containers, the image and the navigation container, we want them to be should I say on one line, like we can either make them horizontal or vertical. We want to be able to control it in one direction. All right. So Flexbox makes that possible such that if you make this header component a Flexbox, it means the children inside of it could be aligned horizontally or vertically, whichever way you want. Please feel free to call my attention over here because I don't expect you to get this once on just hearing it or seeing it. Okay, so if it is not clear to you, do well to call my attention. So what I'm trying to say is over here in our CSS, I want to make this a flexbox. So how do we make it a flexbox? We do it by changing a particular property of the header, which is the display. So as you can see here now, it has so many displays. It has block, content, flexbox, flow, road, grid, inline, and the rest of them. Prior to this, you've only heard of inline and block, right? So what we want to do now is to use flex, not flexbox, right? We use flex. So using flex, you're making this header component a flexbox, which means we are turning this header into a flexbox container. Okay. So because if we just make it a flexbox, it doesn't change anything, and I'll prove that by refreshing our page. Okay. So it now makes it horizontal because that is the default behavior of a flexbox. Everything stays horizontal. So if you now move on this, you can see that the two items are now um, placed side by side, and this remaining side, which is hashed, is like a space, extra space that nothing contains. So which means if I now go here in my body and I go to nav, you see now that it is only highlighting the nav content. It does not highlight the remaining space anymore because it has turned everything inside that flex box into an inline element. Okay, so that's the analogy. That's how Flexbox works. Okay, but still yet we need to have a space between and this nav. So do not worry. I know the image is looking stressed and stretched or whatever. we'll do it one step after another. Okay, so it's a step after another. We adjust one thing before going on to the next. Okay, so from our image, we want it to have a space between each of them. And from what we have in our diagram, we can see that this one moves, this navigation moves to the far end of the screen. Although there's a space here, there's a space here, and there's a space here. Okay, so this is not by the header. The header has nothing to do with this. Okay, so to be in the body, we'll put this space in the body. But I've not spoken about the idea of that, so I won't talk about that now. So for now, let's try to put this space here. So because our header is now a flex box container, it should be easy for us to put a space there. How? By using a property called justify content. So what justify content does is that it helps you to arrange each of your items in a flex box horizontally. Okay. So right now, what I want to do is I want each of them to have a space between them. And so from scrolling down from the so many options we have center, we have end, flex start. You can try each of these to see what happens. So let's try center. Okay, so let's justify each of our content to the center and see what happens. Let me refresh my page. So you see it moves the items to the center and then moves the space here on the left and on the right. Okay, so if we let's inspect our image, so this is our header. As you can see, the content is now in the middle and then there's an even space on the left and on the right. This is not what we want. So we go back to change it. So instead of center, what I want is space between. So what space between does is that whatever space is in that flex container, it puts it in between each of the items in that flex box. So right now, if I refresh the page, you can now see that these two are now pushed to the far ends of side. So let's highlight this from the body and go to header. So you now see the space, the hash part, the inside between the two of them. Okay, this is what justify content does for you. So if we now have another div, another element, breaking it down so we can understand better. So this is just two elements for now, image and nav. All right. If I now create another element, let me say I just create a div element and I say hello world, and I save this, right? So it means it will not be pushed to the far end anymore. That third one will be in the middle. There will not be one in the middle. Then this one will not be here. This one will not be here. So it's kind of putting the space in between each of the items. That's what justify content space between those. Is this point clear? This point clear before I move on. If it's not, you can ask a question.
Okay. It's a bit clear, but I think where I get a bit
Okay.
confused is this inspection. Though I know you showed in the
Okay.
previous classes. Yeah, is a where I get
Okay.
a bit confused. Now, from the CSS, I'm understanding the fact that okay, I can justify the content at the center. I can pick the elements. Each one that I pick will respond on the web page. So,
Okay.
um, just being able to match up what you are doing with the inspect, the essence of the inspection
Yeah.
is that's I
Okay.
mean between that.
Okay. Okay. So the inspect basically is because sometimes you can write a CSS code or a HTML code, but you can't really find the effect happening, right? So that comes the inspect. So with inspect, you can be able to inspect each of the elements and see which of the properties are actually working for which and the rest of them. That's what inspect is for. So to do that, you right click here and you go to inspect. So when you do that, a box would open up for you on the, it could be on the right side, left side, bottom, or top, based on your system's configuration, right? So what you see here is the same code that were written in here. They are the same, they are similar code, right? So this content was not written in our head tag or head element. It was written in the body element. Okay. So opening up the body element, you now see the header. This div, as I highlight or as I hover on each of them, it highlights the element I'm opening. For the header, it now highlights the particular element I want to inspect, which is the header. Okay. And from what it's showing now, it's showing the logo on the left side that is highlighted with a blue color. Okay. And then it's showing this navigation on the far right side with a blue color also to show that these are actual content. Okay. Then in between it, it's showing like some kind of hashed color to show that this is a space that nothing occupies. Okay, so this is how I know that my CSS Flexbox is working the way I want it to work. And if it doesn't work, I will be able to see that, okay, this is what is stopping it from working the way it should work. Okay, because if I click on this and let me open this up, you see the different CSS code I've written. I wrote the width to be 100%. I wrote the display of reflex. So if I uncheck this, it removes the flex. So I know that, okay, this flex is working actually. Then justify content space between. If I remove it, it goes back there. Okay, so this is what inspect basically is just for, to inspect each of the elements visually, so you can see which properties um had those effects on them. So I don't know if this makes better sense or makes clearer point.
Yes, it is. It is now.
Okay, okay, okay then. So moving on, moving on. We have to, let's look at our image again. So now, what I want is, now that I've been able to move, to put a space between these two boxes, these two containers, inside this container, aside the width of this logo, inside this container, I still have this other one to be aligned horizontally. Okay, they are aligned horizontally, but from what we have here, you can see they are more vertical. They are placed one on top of another, which means we can also use the idea of Flexbox in here. So it now depends on choosing the particular parent element you want to be a Flexbox. So remember from here that this body, because it wanted the two children inside of it, which is image and now to be controlled as flex. You want them to have the space, you want them to be horizontal. You gave the flex box to the header, which is the appearance. As you can see right here, it shows flex, which means this is a flex box, right? You gave it to the parent. So it means for us to be able to make these ones, each of these list items horizontal, we need to look for the parent also. Nav is actually the parent container that should be turned into a flex box. But I don't believe nav is the parent container. Why? Because inside our nav container, we have just one child inside, which is this UL. Okay, let me go back to my code to it. So if I'm opening up this nav, inside our nav container, we still have a UL. So it is inside the UL that each of these list items are, which means the parent for each of these list items is UL and not nav. Do you get this point? Okay, because nav is like the grandparent of this LI. So if I make nav a flex box, I don't have direct control over each of these list items to make them horizontal or put a space between them. Until I make UL a flex box, then I can control each of its children as flex boxes. Okay. So which means inside my style.css, the next thing to do is to style this particular UL. Okay, and since right now it is the only UL in our code, I will go there and say UL. I'm taking the tag itself. Okay, and then I will say display again should be flex one, and then I don't want any other thing first. So let me try this one first. So this is how you try one change at a time. You check if it works. If it doesn't work, okay. So right now you can see it works. They are now horizontal, but it looks like they are sort of overlapping, but they actually are not. Let me go back to this so you can see what's going on. So what actually is overlapping is the dot. What is overlapping is the dot. So let me refresh this. I've taken away the flex box, so it is back to what it is. So this is what is overlapping, all right? And so by default, when you create list items, UL, you have this dot. Okay. So let me take it back to flex. So I have, so once I say when I go back, they all are now aligned again. So because I want to remove this dot so I can better see my from our design, there are no dots here. So if we leave the dot, it means we are doing something wrong. So how do you remove the dot? The property for removing that dot is called the list style. So inside your UL, you can either do it in your UL or your LI. So inside your UL, you say you want to remove the list style. So instead of choosing either of these, you scroll down or you look for or you type none. So what this will do is that whatever list style is there, if it is a disk, if it's a star, if it's a decimal or anything, it takes it off, leaving your list item alone. So now if I refresh, you see that those dots are now out. Okay, so you can see how we do these things one step after another to get exactly what we want. So after doing that, the next thing for me should be a space between each of them. As you can see, this one has a space, which from this one has a space. So now we need to analyze this properly because before now, the way we put a space between these two was that we use justify content and did space between. So let's see if we do the same thing, if it will work. Okay, justify content. So let's say space between. So I save this. Now let's see if it works. So I've refreshed, but nothing works. Okay, so let's see why nothing works. So I hover on my nav and it shows me this entire screen. I don't see enough information. So now I'm hovering on UL, and this is the blue. So forget about the parts colored brown or orange, and then the parts colored green, or rather focus on the parts colored blue. Okay, so the part colored blue is the content itself. So UL is this part colored blue. Okay, so when I hover there, you can see that there is no space. There is no space. Um, you can ask your questions. Mute, raising your hand, I won't really see it. I'll have to come back there. So if you have any
Yes,
question, you can ask.
the question is that I don't know if I will be able to get the video tomorrow because I'm having a network issue here, so I'm unable to hear or see the video very well.
Yeah, you can try to go out and join again, and let's see if the network.
Okay, okay, okay.
It's different when you're in the class and you ask questions and your questions are answered than just looking at the videos. They might not really do you justice. So that would be my advice that like you can go out of the meeting and try to join again and see if it fixes your problem. So yeah, that's it. Well, yeah, you get the video tomorrow. Okay. So now hovering on UL, you find out that there actually is not any space. If I hover on header, you can see this hash part, which is showing that there's a space. It is that space we're able to manipulate to put between two containers, right? So since there is no space for the UL, we have to look for another way to put a space between them. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is your justify content will not really work if there's no space in your container. There has to be a space in your container for justify content to work. So for justify content to work here, we have to define a particular width for this one by giving it a width of let's say 500 pixels. So if we have a particular width and then each of the contents contain their spaces, all right, the remaining space will now be what will now be shared between each of the items to separate each of them. But I say that is a bad design anyways. But yeah, so we now have a space between them. So let's hover again on our UL. So now when I hover on our UL, so between each of the items, you can now see
Sorry, I
a
think
purple
I missed how
space.
you do that.
See what?
Sorry.
How I did
It's
it.
like I
Okay,
missed.
how I did it.
Yes. Can you go back to the CSS again, please? I had
Okay.
issue with network.
Well, so what I did is I added a width to the UL. All right. So to the UL container, I'm giving it a width of 500 pixels. So I'm asking it that instead of the normal width you have before, you should now have a width of 500 pixels and then share each of the contents inside it and keep put a space, an equal space between each of them. So that was what I did there. So all I added was a width of 500 pixels and I saved. So that was what increased this. So when you hover,
Okay.
if you go, yeah, so if you go on your UL now, you can now see that the width is now about 500 pixels, right? So right now, if I hover on it, you can see 540 because there is like additional things there. There's a padding which will come over. We'll talk about later on. So I'll tell you how come about this 40 pixel that is added to our 500. We're supposed to have a fixed width of 500 pixel, right? So now when I hover on UL, you can now see a space between each of the items. All right, there's now a space between each of the items because once the UL covers a width of 500 pixel and shares a particular percentage for each of the items, there is an extra space remaining. So it now shares that extra space between each of the items. Okay, and it goes on from there. But this is not the method I would want to use. I would want to introduce us to a new method. Okay, but it is good that you understand why justify content didn't work for now. So I'm going to take the width out. I'm going to take the width out and save. So we'll go back to our normal, our normal, our normal look. So now what I want to do is I want to put a space directly between them there. I don't want the UL to have a fixed width. I want to specify how much width or how much space should be between each of them. Okay. And when you make something a flex, you can specify what you want, the space you want by giving it a gap. All right. So now if I say I want a gap of 20 pixels, what it does is that it gives each of them a space of 20 pixels from each other. Okay. So this way it is more easier to control the space between each of the items. So now you can now see it means this space between this home and new is now 20 pixels. This is 20 pixels. So if you hover on it, if you try to inspect it, you won't really see the difference there. But this now is a better design for my UL. Okay, this is now a better design because I now control the spaces there. I'm not really controlling the width of the UL. I don't really care about the width of the UL. All I care about is space between each of the list items. Okay, so this here now you can say is a better design than our former one. Okay, so now we can see that just by making this UL a text box, it has already fixed our width because the width of the image is already stretching the entire width of the screen, which we don't want already, but it seems to be aligned properly right now. So what's next? So as you can see from this screen, when I hover on this, there are different colors, right? There is a brown color on the top and bottom, and then there is a green color on the left side. Okay, so this brings us to our box model, right? This brings us to what we call box model. So let me explain what this green thing does. If I reduce my screen, don't worry about how I'm using it now. I will show you how to do it later. But if I reduce my screen, and you can see I'm trying to reduce it, it now stops because um it is now touching the image. Okay, so this is where the home ends. But because there's a space here, which is that space green color you're seeing there, it can't go closer to the W. Okay, which means there is something is in a space there, which is named padding. So we are going to discuss what box model is. So basically, the box model is made up of three parts. I think this should be in our code. Our test program, the box model. When I find out particular thing, will let us know. But what we then box model is that it's made up of three basic things. It's made up of a border, one, made up of a padding, matching. Let me go to my CSS and write that out. In comments, I'll use comments to write that out. I'll say the box model is made up of the border, the margin, and the padding. So the box model goes on to let you that every tag, every element you make has a box model, which means it has a border. Sorry guys. I think our network has disconnected me from joining the meeting. I'm still trying to connect now. I'm currently on my mobile, just trying to reach out. So while I work on connecting up again, is there any question like anyone wants to ask while I try to fix this network issue? Any questions? Please confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. From my hand, no question.
Okay, 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 okay. Um, if this system would just start up, we we are almost done with creating the navigation. Um, um, so we can start working on the project from tomorrow. But um, probably when we start tomorrow to work on the body, and we make some progress there, we'll do maybe let's see some advanced problems there, and then the remaining one would be for us to take from our assignment to complete and submit. Uh, so that's the thing. Each of the assignments given has to be done before the deadline, so we can better free up the space for the next set of assignments to come. Otherwise, you will just be piling up each of these assignments after another. I'm actually impressed with the pace at which the class is going today because it seems we are working with our curriculum and trying to pick up a lot of things. It's just um this it's just this issue of the network just trying to embarrass me. I think it's probably okay. Definitely. Let me try to share my screen again. Please let me know when you can see my screen. You finally just see.
I can't see your face now.
Yeah. Let's do time. It's taking longer than I expected. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, I can see your screen, but I don't know about the other.
Oh,
Yes, I see your screen.
okay. All right. Um. Okay. So so far, on the navigation, we've been able to add an image and get each of our navigations on the correct place it should be, and then we'll be able to add spaces on there. So to complete this up, I think what is something very important, because the idea of navigation is that it should be able to link you to a different site or a different pages. So this should be able to link us to different pages in our screen. Although um, this project only allows one page, right? But we should not refrain from doing it the right way, which means that by right, that of each of our lists created here should actually be a link. Okay, so right now what we have is a link. So I would argue that this is missing the anchor tag, because remember we use the anchor tag to link from one site to another. So I will just try to add it up here, href, but I'm going to leave the the address empty for now. So I'm just going to quickly run that run that for each of them, so we can make a little bit adjustment, and then we can finalize on the active state of um, our links. So this is how you'll be creating projects in a real world situation, right? You'll be creating it like this. You'll be making mistakes and trying to correct them along the way. There's nothing wrong with that, so long as you identify the mistake you're making and you're able to fix them. So for this one, I just decided to omit it first, so we can go on with development while we come back. So this is the right way to get our link. All right. So if now we go back, if we go back and refresh, you now see that each of these list items are now blue. This is as a result of me trying to explain what the box model is earlier on. But before that, and let me just zoom in. You can now see that each of them are now colored purple and has an underline on it. We'll visit that. We'll continue from there tomorrow for that one. But I want to discuss the box model before we end today's class. Okay? And I said it's made up of the border, margin, and pattern. And down here, I wanted to discuss the box model using the UL. So I gave it a border of 1 pixel, which is the width. So for creating a border, you give it three different values. You give it a width, you give it a type, and you give it blank. Type that different. They could be dashed, they could be dotted, and the rest of them. Depends on what you want, on what you like, and then the color, right? So with that, you can now get this. So let me hover um on this, to our nav, and then our UL. So hovering on it, you can see we have two brown colors on the top and bottom. And then by the left side, you can see green, which is showing the brown color is showing your border. If you come down, um, I'll click on this orange, this UL. So now when I come down, you see this. And when I over here in the middle, it's showing the content, the complete width of the content, right? Then when I move up to this part, the right padding, all right, you see it highlights the green section there. And when I move outside, and when I go outside, you now see a margin. So this is showing you that this has a margin of 16 pixels. So what is the margin? Or let's start from padding, right? What is a padding? Padding is the space between the contents of an element and the border, right? So this is our border, this is our UL border. Okay. So the space between the border and the content in here is the home, new, popular, trending, and categories. So the space between the content is what we refer to as padding. And right now you can see that the top has zero padding, right has zero padding, bottom has, but the left has a padding of 40. Okay. So that's what padding is for. Then going up to border, you know what the border is right now? It's the black line. This one is the margin. What is the margin? So the margin is the space between your border and any other thing outside the element. Okay. So there can be other elements above or below. The space between those other elements and that particular element is what we refer to as a, by default, your UL has a padding length of 40 pixels. It doesn't have border. We gave this border by ourselves in CSS. And then it has a margin of top and bottom. So if I want to remove the margin top and bottom, all I have to do is come here. Remember, it's UL. So all I have to do is say, I want the margin to be 0. And I save it. Once I do this, it removes the margin top and bottom. Okay. So if I go there now, let me come here. So clicking on UL, if I go there now, you see when I highlight on margin, there's nothing highlighted there. Okay, but the padding is still there, the padding, but padding left. So for me to remove padding, I can do the same thing. I can come here and say padding should be 0. And when I save this, let's check it out. You see it closes that space there. Okay, so this is how the box model works. But right now you can see that you're at the top, right? It is no longer aligned horizontally the way it should be. Okay, we are not far from getting it correctly. All we have to do is that just as we aligned each of the items in our flex box horizontally, we can also align them vertically. What am I saying? So what I'm saying is this image and this navigation, right, to be they were the contents in our header. And using justify contents, we're able to align them horizontally. Okay, we could put a space between them. So for us to arrange these two items in our flex box in a vertical direction, we need to use another element called align items. So back in our header, if you come to align items, what I want, there are so many. There's baseline, there's center, there's end, first baseline. So you can experiment each of these and see the different effects they give. So what I want is to align them to the center. Okay. So vertically, it should be in the center of the container vertically. So once I refresh, you can now see this navigation having a space on the top and bottom, and it is now arranged properly in the center of our header. Okay, so this is now in the center of this. Okay, so this is what align items is. And if I take away the border now, after explaining the box model, if I take away the border, if I remove this one, we now have our navigations the way it should be directly. So all that is remaining is to give it this color, and then when we hover on it, if I can get the okay, so this is the color, but when I hover on it, it should have a red image. Okay, so this is a lot of information to take in. I don't want to add more to it. Okay, so I'm going to end the class here. So by next week and by tomorrow, when we come, we'll continue from where we stopped and we build on the previous thing we learned and then try to go on with our project. Okay, so I don't know if there's any questions to ask here before I end my sharing and stuff. Any questions?
Yes, but yes, I have a lot of questions, but I don't think we can go back on that now. I would just want to ask, will the video be uploaded to our email so I can go and check because I was having network issue very, very badly here.
Okay. Yes. The video will be sent to you, so you
Okay, sir.
don't have to worry
That's
about that.
okay, sir. That's what I want to know, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right.